Alright, I'm going to be voice-overing this first little stupid intro to this video to give you guys a little bit of an explanation as to what's going on here. So, this is a video about this old Manco American Express, original American Express go-kart. Now, in this video, I'm saying like, oh yeah, it was bought from somebody. I thought it maybe used to have been raced. I have since found out that this was a yard cart that a family had used, and that family had other go-karts that they raced, except this one specifically was never a racing go-kart. That being said, this video also takes place over the course of a couple years, as I never really kept my stuff organized, and one day this week I decided, well, shit, I'm gonna go through all of my old phones and compile all of my random videos that I have recorded on various projects, and it turns out that I actually have a lot more content than I thought I did. So this video is going to be me kind of going through whatever I recorded and hopefully filling the gaps in where I realize that they are. And I hope you guys enjoy. So the first little part of this video is basically me just putting a carburetor back on this Tecumseh. I think I'm putting a Briggs industrial carb on it because the Tecumseh carbs don't really work well for anything that you go over bumps with. Now, if you'll notice here, the other interesting piece about this is I had modified this motor to have a fitting in the crankcase to run a pulse fuel pump because that gas tank that was put on there doesn't sit really very high above the carburetor. So it just worked a lot better to put a pulse fuel pump on it rather than trying to sit there and raise the fuel tank and have it be barely over the level of the float bowl anyway.
Alright, so I got the first part of this throttle done, basically cut it out of a coat hanger, and you just goes like that from there to there. It's not obviously working the greatest since that carburetor isn't bolted up, but there, that's about how it's supposed to work anyway. So now if you're wondering, another thing I should mention is if you're wondering how you make such a nice bend like that for making throttle linkages like this, you just basically throw it in the vise and make your first 90-degree bend, and then pull it a little bit out of the vise in front of the, or so there's a little slack behind the 90-degree, and take a chisel and then just punch it, or then, punch it to where there's a next 90-degree bend right after this 90-degree bend. That's the way I've found the most success with making those, and it works out pretty well. So yeah, now I've got to put the gasket back in and put the carburetor back on and basically hook up the cable and figure out a bunch of return springs. Right, so this is what I've got so far. So we've got this running to here with the return spring right over there that goes to that part of it, which runs to this, which is going to have a cable on it with that screw that pushes on that, and it has a return spring going down here. Now, one issue I didn't really notice is the fact that this push mower carb has no idle adjustment. So that's kind of what this screw is going to act as. Just hopefully turn that out, and that'll let it give a little slack. But it's not perfect, but I just hope all this works. And then the next thing after that is going to be hopefully finding enough fuel line to recomplete this fuel system. Alright, hey guys, today we're going to be working on this American Express 1.0 go-kart that I kind of teased earlier in that last video on the aluminum frame go-kart. Now, I did originally shoot an intro, and I shot some footage of me setting up this carb linkage here and that Briggs & Stratton carb, but as things happen, hanging out with a friend, and we decide, let's get this go-kart working, and then you have too much fun and you forget to turn on the camera. Well, when we were having too much fun, this original Tecumseh OHH50 kind of decided to, lock up. And well, that's unfortunate, but I mean, what had happened was we were going along with that aluminum go-kart and then this one, the throttle cable snapped on the other one, so we couldn't drive it home. So then I hopped on the back of this thing here, and we got less than a mile down the road because we were like 5 miles from home. And then this one's motor decided to lock out maybe a mile after that. So we had a nice, fun walk after that. But yeah. So anyway, it's kind of sad because this Tecumseh motor really had quite a bit of compression. I mean, I think I do have a clip of me pulling it over, but this thing if it would catch, it would rip it out of your hand, and that's pretty good for a flathead. I'm not sure exactly how much compression these things had normally, but I think this one probably had some performance parts. So it's kind of sad, but it's also, bound to blow up eventually, because I mean, I'm sure these performance go-karts motors, every time they turn on, they're probably held wide open for a while and they get beat the shit out of because they're on a go-kart. So anyway, my new motor that I'm going to get is I got this 20-year-old Tecumseh OHH50, old, 5-horse overhead valve. This one was actually never really used. I think I did the break-in period when we got it, but yeah, I just bought this from a guy who had it sitting around for a while, so yeah, I'm gonna put this on there, but first, I've always wanted to try and performance mod one of these, so basically, I'm gonna obviously do the header, make a better intake manifold, because this has one that goes sweeping down, not a very great design. Then we're gonna, of course, shave the head, port and polish that. All right, so maybe you'll see all this better. It's on the bench here now. The unfortunate thing is I think I am gonna have to remove this original fuel tank because it kind of conflicts with the seat when you line it all up. So I think that's gonna have to go. I'll mock it up later, because if I can put it on, I would rather use this one, because the other thing we're gonna have to do is make a little hole and put a nipple in for a crankcase vent so we can run a fuel pump, because the American Expresses suck. They're absolute shit for mounting any kind of fuel tank on, because the fuel tanks on pretty much any engine I've seen except for Briggs 5-horse with that fuel tank carb setup, they don't fit on there. So yeah, I'm gonna, that one, this has a fuel tank that's mounted right there, so I think I'm just gonna run that same fuel tank with the fuel pump. I'm just gonna have to take the fitting I used in that motor to put in a breather out and then put it back in this one. All right, so I got halfway through making this intake manifold and I realized a problem. So the idea was we were gonna bolt this right here to basically make it, straight shot out, and then, short intake manifold, hopefully better horsepower, lower low end torque. But anyway, then I realized, well, shit, there's no possible way you're gonna be able to get that bolt in there. No realistic way. So then I was like, well, shit, am I just gonna have to use the original manifold? Well, then I thought I might as well just weld the other washer on straight and have this be the carburetor side. So still be shorter, just won't be quite as, gravity will still be against it, but I still think we'll get more power out of this without fucking it up. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do right now. And anyway, I had to do a little more welding around right there just to make it so it seals right there, so I didn't want to have to grind that down and re-weld it. So I think this works out better. I just got to make sure I do a better weld on the other side, which I think this side I might actually have to grind off. You start by using this washer. Might actually have to grind off the fucking zinc, because yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'm gonna weld this side, and then we're gonna go on the die grinder and clean all that up. So yeah. Also, I'm probably gonna have to find another washer this size, but anyway, yeah, that'll be our next step. All right, so I got this this flange made now. Of course, it's not centered at all. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the die grinder, and I'm basically just going to port match this whole thing so it matches. Then obviously better flow and more performance. And then after I do that, then I'm going to weld the pipe on, and then die grind out the inside of the pipe, smooth out the edges, and then basically do the same with the exhaust, except we only have to do it on one edge, and then. Then we'll be able to take the head off and do all the rest of our porting and polishing on the head, and then our shaving of the head. Right, so here's what I got so far. I got this on here, got this flange on here, and it's port matched pretty well. I just took the die grinder and I started the port job on this, putting it all the way down. I'm hoping that after I get the head off, I can really get all the way down there and just make the whole freaking thing bigger. And same with the exhaust. There's actually already a lip right here I can see that we can port out. So yeah. Anyway, basically now I just got to stick this on here and weld it, and then basically weld it all the way around, and then, grind out our freaking cutting, or our bolt holes, so we can actually get some bolts in there, and then, yeah, that'll be how this is done anyway. All right, so I was working on all this, and I, got the intake manifold all port matched and ground out and stuff, and then I realized, well, I should probably figure out what kind of a carb I'm going to use. So this was the Briggs & Stratton carb that I was originally going to use. Then I realized that this actually will not work because because this is too small to work with that big of a hole on that intake manifold there. So then I had, just for reference, I got this Tecumseh carb, which is very similar to that one, but it has a much bigger hole because it's a bigger hole and then flange size up top, because it's an 8 or a 9 horse Tecumseh carb. And then I was like, well, shit, do I want to try and use this one? And I really don't, because then that one also has the issue of the flange being, at least it looks like it have the issue of the flange being way too small to fit over that hole. So then I thought, well, this still has a good needle and float, which is what this one needed. And yeah, so I figured why don't I just use that float on this bigger 8-horse carb. Now, if I remember correctly, this is the one Tecumseh carb I had that didn't actually mind bumps that much. So the only thing I really need now for this carb is I need to find the adjustable, the adjustable needle, because that needle is obviously going to be way too small and it's non-adjustable. And somewhere I have a couple of those adjustable things that go on the end of there. But either way, I'm going to use the float bowl and the the rest of the stuff for this carb to go on this motor. And hell, it's even a Tecumseh green. It's even a Tecumseh green here, so it matches. So, all right, so it is the next day, and I have some updates. So first, I started the day off by re-drilling these holes, and now it looks pretty good in there. I got it pretty well matched up in there, and that's just the gasket in there, that little ridge. But besides that, because I didn't take the gasket off when I did the grinding, but whatever. But yeah, that looks pretty well port matched. And then basically what I need to do now to finish off this manifold is to grind these spots flat and hope I don't create a vacuum leak in the process. So yeah, but I got our carburetor all set up, and then I found all the parts I needed. Just need an idle screw and a little idle mixture screw. Or I needed the idle adjuster and the idle air mixture. And then we just need to drill our holes for that to mount on there, basically. And then yeah, we will have the carburetor done anyway. So yeah, that's the next thing though, is I'm probably going to use a brand new grinding disc. It's got that nice and square, and I'm going to grind that flat, so hopefully we can get these Allen bolts to sit flush so it'll stay on there. All right, so this is what I got for that side so far, and I tested it for vacuum leaks. And basically I did the first pass with the cutting wheel just so I could get really deep in there, just like as you can see right there. And this was the more aggressive side, and I just went a little bit too deep with the cutting wheel. And right where that little deep cut is, that's where the vacuum leak is, so I just got to weld it up and re-grind it down. All right, so I welded up this side and re-ground it down, and now she makes a good seal. So yeah, now time to move on to this other side and get that all ground down, and it should be good to go. Then of course you're just gonna need to, whenever we go to do a belt sand the head, we're gonna belt sand these flat, and then hopefully it'll make a nice good seal. All right, so now I got both sides ground down. So yeah, they tested it for vacuum leaks. It doesn't really, doesn't seem like it's leaking there. So now this should be good to go right on the motor. So yeah, I'm gonna mock that up now. Right, so I got the manifold mocked up here on the motor, and then basically this is about how the carburetor will go on from there. Just gotta drill those holes and then basically do the same thing on this side. And actually, now that I think about it, it would be really simple if I just, what I'm probably gonna end up doing is drilling holes, and I could just tap it with, the size of things I have. That might be the simplest thing rather than fucking with trying to grind all those welds down, because I don't think those welds are as good, and I don't think they'll hold. So yeah, now that I think about it, that's what I'm gonna do. But anyway, yeah, basically just gotta line this up here so there won't be any leaks, and then, yeah, then that'll be our carburetor setup for now at least. Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm pretty proud of that whole thing, and then next we'll have to move on to the exhaust part of this. All right, so I got the holes drilled and tapped here, and that's how it turned out. I think this intake manifold is pretty much done except for the belt sanding part. But yeah, that just sticks on right there and goes about like that. I think that's honestly one of the intake manifolds I'm more proud of that I've made. So yeah, next step, I think I'm either gonna, can't decide if I'm gonna do the header when it's on the block or when the head's on the block or off. Well, yeah, that's kind of a tougher decision to make. I think I might as well, since the header doesn't really need to be exact, I might as well just bite the bullet and take the whole head off. So, all right, so I got the head off, and I took the valves out here. I haven't started making that exhaust yet, because one thing I noticed is the intake valve seat, I don't know if you can see it right there, but the intake valve seat, at least on right here, is pretty, damn, focus. Yeah, it's not very, that needs to be relapped. So I'm gonna hope that I could find my my lapping compound here and relap it, because yeah, that definitely needs to get done. So other than that, yeah, I'm probably gonna do that first so I don't forget about it. Probably gonna relap both of them, because the exhaust look good, but I am gonna relap both of them. But actually, I think right now I am gonna work on the exhausts. All right, I don't remember what I was doing last time or what I said I'd do, but I went and I shaved the head. And I don't know, really, I took off quite a bit, basically. As much as I took off is right here. This used to catch my fingernail when I used to go over this, and now it doesn't. So I've shaved off quite a bit, and I didn't notice till afterwards. I shaved off enough to where it started shaving down this ear. So yeah, we should definitely have some higher compression now, but then I went to town, got the valve grinding compound, and then I got some gasket sealer too. So yeah, now I'm pretty much gonna make the header right about now, and then yeah, finish pouring and polishing this and that, and then I'm gonna lap the valves in case something nicks the valves in the meantime. So yeah, first things first, I'm gonna make the header and then port and polish that one. And actually, first thing, I might finish porting the intake, just to do, you know, one thing at a time, because there are definitely some sharp edges in there we could smoothen out. And then of course, you know, just in general make the whole thing wider. So yeah. All right, so I got the intake all ported and polished out. Should be good. Now here's the mock-up for how we're gonna make the header. And yeah, so we're just gonna basically do the same thing. Widen this out, widen the whole hole out, and then what I did on the other side was take the sanding wheel and kind of widen this out, so I'm gonna widen this out and then kind of, you know, smoothen out all the sharp edges, and then that'll be it for the porting and polishing of this. All right, so I've done all the porting and polishing I'm willing to do on the exhaust side. I did definitely nick the seat a few times, not with the abrasive part of the bit, but just the smooth part that spins. So we're definitely gonna need to grind or, you know, redo that valve seat. But yeah, that's what I'm gonna do next, is relap the valves. Hopefully get a good seat on them. So yeah, then I still need to weld up weld up our header flange right there. You know, get the header welded up, and then yeah, put it back together. So yeah, next thing, I'm definitely gonna grind them valves though. Okay, so I got done lapping both valves here, and it went fine. Used the drill method. Now, one thing to note is that this valve did seem kind of suspect, like it's maybe a very like unnoticeable to the eye amount of out of round. And I noticed that because the drill was shaking a little bit, but that I could also all be in my head. But this is definitely something I should note for later in case I get a bunch of, you know, fire coming out of the intake or something, or, you know, less notable symptoms. But what I'm definitely going to do is I might have an extra one of these heads lying in a bin somewhere. I'm going to look and see if I can find an extra valve, because if I could use a different valve, I probably would. But for now, I'm sure this one will be fine. So yeah, I just got to stick this valve in, and then basically I'm going to reassemble put the valves back in, and then that might be it for the night, because I don't have a whole lot of other. Actually, so what I think I'm going to do tonight is put the valve springs back in, and then I definitely want to see if that camshaft is going to be able to work in this motor. So that might be what I do if I have time. I may not have time. So. All right, I don't even remember where the last point I left off was yesterday, but when I remember, we got the head done here, and I think the first thing I'm going to do is weld up the exhaust header, because I just kind of want to be done with all this fucking manifold welding bullshit, because it is kind of annoying. I mean, this is going to be no exception, because we got to line this up here and then, you know, weld it and then grind it back down, because that's going to be really thin for the size of pipe we got. But it'll all work its way out anyways. All right, so it was really close fit, but I got the header I got it welded up and I got it on there. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, those little Allen bolts are going to vibrate loose every other time you drive the thing, and you are probably right. But at this point, that's a problem for future me and not current me. So yeah, it'll all be fine. So next, I'm going to pull the other 5-horse motor off and tear it apart, and then take this side cover off, and then we'll exchange out our cams. Now, the other thing I did notice is I remembered one of my old go-kart motors was the 6-horse variant of this, and I wanted to see if it was the bore or the stroke that changed the size, and I looked it up because I actually found the old crankshaft, and unfortunately it is the bore, not the stroke, so we're not going to be able to make a 6-horse out of this 5-horse today. But okay, so I got this original motor apart, and actually what's really interesting is it's no longer seized. So what had happened was this connecting rod, which had so much play in it, actually jammed itself up against the camshaft and that seized it. So you can see there's way too much play in that. So then I put the camshaft in, and then I didn't put it in, but anyway, when the camshaft is in there, that all of a sudden somehow jammed itself up against one of the cam lobes and quit the whole thing from spinning. So, yeah, and actually the reason it blew up, the reason that the connecting rod play got this bad too was the fact that before we had started running it, before we started running it, I had checked the oil, but we ran it for about 2 hours, and it would absolutely push oil out of this breather right here. But I didn't think it never usually pushed out that much oil, but I suppose we were running it pretty hard for a while, and then it used up all its oil, and it completely just blew up. All right, so these are our two cams. The one on the left is out of the motor we're building, and the one out on the right is out of the other one that blew up. Now, the interesting thing about these is I was right on the fact that they are in fact compatible. They are totally the same, but this original one is actually not a plastic cam, it's a metal cam. And not only that, but if you look at this, that lobe is quite a bit fatter than that lobe, so there really wouldn't be any point in using the flathead cam. But also, the reason, I don't know if I had mentioned this, but that original motor had kicked over a lot faster. Not a lot faster, it had kicked over a lot harder, kicked back a lot harder. Well, the reason was did not have one of these. This is the compression release mechanism in this cam that had just fallen out. So, yeah, this cam's going back in. However, in the name of having as much stuff to not break, is like I don't want any of this. I want to eliminate all sources of faults, if that makes sense. So I'm not putting that compression release in there because those can fall apart and cause issues. And then I'm going to take this governor out because that'll cause issues. And then I've got to, like I said before, tap a crankcase vent in here somewhere. I don't know if it makes sense. Probably put it somewhere right around here. Yeah, I'm going to put a crankcase vent in there so I can run an oil pump or a fuel pump. All right, so I got that fitting I was going to put in there. As you can see, the head of it took kind of a beating from me hammering it in, but that don't really matter. Just a vacuum line that's going to go on there, and then on the inside, it really doesn't protrude any. I don't know if you can really see that, but it doesn't protrude any, and yeah, I've got some red Loctite on there, so that should lock it in there, and we should be good to go. Next thing is to remove the governor.
All right, so this is about our first gap in footage here. So at some point, I guess, for whatever reason, the last part of that engine build I never recorded. So what ended up happening was finishing the engine build there, obviously took out the governor. If you'll notice, I had to lengthen the chain and end up using some 1.25 inch steel tubing to raise that motor up just that little bit, because otherwise that recoil cover would have hit the tire. Anyway, so, and as I'm saying in this video, I thought that 8-horse Tecumseh kart would have handled bumps just fine, but it didn't. So kind of the point here is that we're going to be remodifying the intake manifold to fit a 30mm Mikuni carburetor, just a regular boot, and a 30mm Mikuni carburetor, because I had a couple of extras off of a snowmobile around this time.
All right, so I took this intake manifold off, and we're going to have to do a little more modifying to it. Mainly, the big thing is these bolt holes that I drilled and tapped. I'm going to have to actually weld those up and sand this thing flat again, because where that O-ring goes is going to go over both of those bolt holes, and that's going to create a vacuum leak, and that won't be fun. So I'm going to have to weld those up, grind it flat, sand this flat again like I actually had to do originally. I don't think I ever recorded any videos of that. And then we can bolt this on here. We can really actually bolt this on clocked anyway, because obviously the carburetor will rotate in there. And then we should have the carburetor bolted on. All right, I got those plugged. Now I just got to grind them flat, and then probably think I'm going to belt sand this flat, just to try and get the best, get that as flat as possible so it'll actually seal. All right, so I got it belt sanded down. I think the easiest way to do this now is actually just going to be to do the same thing I did with the last one, and just drill and tap it to 1/4 inch, and yeah, just thread it all the way through, because it's always really hard to get a proper nut and seated on the backside of these welded flanges. Because yeah, I got that all sanded flat though, got it welded up. All right, I got my holes drilled, and I got the threads cut. So then I'm just gonna silicone the shit out of this, bolt it on there, and gotta bolt this back on the engine, and then should be good to get the carburetor set up. All right, so I've got this got it bolted on here. It actually turned out really nice. Now I can just throw some silicone back on that and bolt her back on the engine. All right, I got that this carburetor mounted on here, and it's really solid and nice. However, the issue is, as it always is with these American Express 1.0 carts, it seems, you gotta constantly clearance stuff to fit. Like, if you look at this, I actually had to raise this up with these big pieces of iron, raise the motor up, and then, you know, this exhaust didn't fit, goes right up against this. I don't think this wing here is original piece. I think that's something they might have had to have for the dirt track they were racing at. I'm not totally sure. It's really, really compelling to cut this off because I don't see any other American Express 1.0s with this, but I also have only ever seen 2 other pictures of this exact cart with the motor offset like that. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm guessing I'll have enough room to slip that in there, but I also might not. So we'll have to check on, see on that. I don't know how else I'd end up clearancing that other than bending it back. So I might be able to have to take the carburetor off, put the throttle on, and then do it. But anyway, that's all besides the point. I think for now, because we got to figure out the choke, because we're gonna have to run a choke somewhere, and probably maybe somewhere over here to run the choke cable from the snowmobile, and so we actually have a choke, and then run our fuel lines, which isn't going to be too hard. But yeah, I think this we're gonna have to use this throttle cable, string it all the way back through all that shit. So yeah, it's the next night, and since both the 2 carburetors I'm going to be using for 2 different go-karts came off of one snowmobile, we've got this single choke lever that splits out to 2 cables here. So what I'm gonna have to try and do is, I've got this other choke lever that I'm gonna have to take the cable out of and try and hopefully take this one apart and make 2 out of 1, because this is on an old Yamaha exciter, so that's all different anyway. So yeah, I guess I'm just gonna have to punch out these roll pins, take them both apart, see how they both work, and yeah. At this point, I've got two different choke levers set up here. I think I'm gonna use this one. Kind of already adjusted it. It should really lock that. Did I lock it into place already? Yeah, I did. Okay, so I gotta throw this in there, and then we gotta move on to getting our fuel pump and fuel line set up. I got this choke just kind of zip tied there for now, because I really don't have another spot to put it. The other thing I should note is that this throttle's kind of bent at a weird angle here, but what else do you do? Here I've got a Tecumseh fuel pump. I mean, I have another one that's just the standard 2-bolt style, but this is a Tecumseh engine, so I might as well put the Tecumseh pump on it. I'm gonna try and figure out where I can mount this to be right. Of course, I got this vacuum line here running to the pulse side, and probably gonna end up trying to mount it somewhere down here. Maybe I'll use this old bracket right there to mount it to. Then we just got to run all our lines, and yeah, then we should be able to put some gas in it and actually fire this thing up. Okay, so this is the fuel pump I got rigged up. I had just enough fuel line to make this happen, pretty standard anyway. I think next I'm gonna pull this outside, put some gas in it, and see if it runs good. Probably not gonna be able to ride it around really at all because it's cold and icy out, but we'll see. There you have it. I mean, it runs okay. I think as it sits right now, it might need more main jet, which is all, it's all in the tuning really, because it kind of runs good, but it's kind of got a bog off the line whenever you give it the gas. So I think I might have to put a little bit bigger of a main jet, which is kind of a surprise to me because, this being a 200cc, I suppose it is a 175cc, something like that. But anyway, it might, I don't remember the exact CCH, but the point is that it, I'd be surprised if it needs more CCs that are more fuel than a half of a 440 2-stroke snowmobile, but Then again, 4 strokes and 2 strokes are two completely different animals, and yeah, so I think tonight, since it's late, that'll be it. And see you guys next day I work on this. Probably when it's actually warm, but it's at least cool that I got this to work.
All right, voiceover me again. Now, what the next part of this video is probably going to be is going to be me changing out carburetor jets and fighting the tuning of this thing and probably not figure it out because of the information that I have learned since me fucking with this go-kart. So, these carburetors were 30 millimeter Mikuni carburetors off of a Polaris 440 fan-cooled dual carb engine. Well, the other carburetor ended up going on my aluminum go-kart. You guys will get to see a video on that one. That one has a Briggs 296 that has the same modifications, and these both had 155 jets in them originally, and those are the leanest jets that I currently have for these Mikuni carburetors. Well, the 155 jet on that much bigger modified engine was still running too rich until I switched over to E85, and it was running about right, if not still a little too rich on E85. So I think the issue with this one was it would actually run just fine on the low end, but then on the top end it would kind of surge, which makes sense. It's interesting that it treated this engine totally differently than running way too rich on the bigger engine. But that being said, I am fairly positive that's what my tuning issues are going to be, and you guys are going to get to watch me be really confused about this and probably not figure it out in this video. So I'm hopefully going to be retuning this, making another video. I'm going to have to get jet drills and just solder the end of a jet closed and make my own jets, because I don't think you can get jets that are small enough, because this carburetor is probably way too big for this motor, but it's the best one that I have on my budget. So stay tuned for an upcoming video and enjoy me being really confused as to why the hell this thing never ran right.
Okay, so here's what I found out. I took the flow bowl off to replace the jet, and there was hardly any gas in it. So then I thought, well, hey, why don't I try a different, a standard clone style fuel pump, Honda clone style fuel pump, rather than these stupid, rather than the ancient Tecumseh fuel pump. Well, as it turns out, it runs a lot better, but now it runs like it's way too rich. So I'm guessing that my fuel pump was that Tecumseh fuel pump was the issue. So I'm gonna switch out the jet for the one I had before, which is a 230 that's been slightly drilled out, and then we'll see how it runs then. Okay, so we do still have way too much main jet. I mean, as you can see right here, the exhaust is blowing black. So I know that this needle valve is also up all the way, but I think I'm going to switch this out. I think, like I said, originally we tried it with like the 150 or whatever it was. That was originally jetted for the 440, and it seemed kind of lean. I'm going to go with the 180 next and see where that gets us. But really, this is all just trial and error. And then if 180 is still too rich, I'm going to lower the needle jet and see where that gets us. But yeah, it's all just really trial and error. Now it runs okay, but it's still, you step on it and it goes wide open and it just absolutely coughs and sputters. So it really needs less fuel. All right, so this last test drive went much better. However, it's still a little bit rich. It still kind of hesitates. So I had this air bleed. It turned out one turn, so I turned it out a second turn, because this is a air bleed. So therefore, it's the more you turn it out, the leaner the mixture gets. That's just for idle though. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set that needle jet to be centered rather than all the way rich, because there's 5 positions. I'm going to put it on position 3 rather than the most rich. So. And then we're going to do a test drive again, and then I really don't feel like changing that jet out again, but I might have to, but we'll see. Alright, so I was wrong. That was originally, this clip was actually set in the center here. Now if you go up, that means that it's leaner, because it's letting that needle drop further down into the main jet. I'm just going to decide to set this lean right here and now, because if I remember correctly, when I use these slide carburetors on small engines, on these 4-stroke industrial commercial engines, non-power sports engines, they generally like to be all the way down. So that's just where I'm going to set it, and we'll see how it runs now.
All right, you can hear in this last clip that I have of this thing running, it's still doing the exact same thing that the other go-kart was doing, actually, where you can hear I'm holding it wide open, but it's kind of sputtering at the top end, and I found out that's because it's simply getting too much fuel. Like I said, I ended up at this clip with a 180 jet, which was still had to have been way too rich. Now this is the last last clip that I have for today, so this will be the end of the video. What ended up happening is I ended up getting distracted and taking this carburetor off and putting it on an old Yamaha Enduro that I had to see how that thing would work, and that thing never worked. So I took the carburetor back off. It has yet to make its way back on the American Express, but now I at least know where to start when I want to run that thing again. So I should hopefully at some point in the near future getting that thing running again. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to tune in next time. Goodbye.